by Grabthar's Hammer. What a review. So, some folks bizarrely continue to go support me on Patreon at a level that allows them to flat out dictate something that I will review. And this month, I'm going to be taking a look at Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest is, I think at this point, you could almost call it a cult film. It was a decent hit. I think a fair number of people have heard of it, but the people who love it tend to really love it. And I do enjoy this a lot. Now, in case you've never seen it, let's start with a brief synopsis. So Galaxy Quest deals with a Star Trek-esque, it's very blatantly based off Star Trek, TV show from decades ago that was canceled, and basically the cast have had to just ride that very small level of fame they achieved through that show the rest of their careers. They have to do conventions and make appearances, and you know, that's how they sustain from there. And you know, different members of the cast feel different ways about that. Some are just kind of resigned to it. The guy who got to play the captain kind of revels in it. Other people are super resentful about it. And so that's your starting premise, and they get taken onto a spaceship by a race of aliens who saw their show. They caught the TV signals beamed out. And this race of aliens doesn't know what acting is. They don't have fiction in their society. So they thought these were factual documentaries. And they then go and get this crew to help them with a real outer space problem on a precisely recreated replica of the ship they used to pilot on the series. And obviously it's a comedy. So let's start with the cast, because this is a great cast. Your captain character is played by Tim Allen. Now, I know Tim Allen is somebody who is kind of distasteful to a fair number of people at this point, I'd say. But regardless of what you think of him, in life, he is good in this part. He is really great at, without ever doing a Shatner impression, capturing that sense of ego, of just reveling in the attention and riding it for all it's worth. He gets that really well, and that's important because a big part of what keeps the plot moving forward, or at least brings the other characters in, is his determination to actually help this race and actually live up to what they think he is. And if an actor couldn't sell that, the movie would fall apart immediately. But he does, and he works really well for that. I do think Tim Allen's kind of limited as an actor in terms of the number of things he's good at, but what he's good at works really well for this part. Also, we have Sigourney Weaver. Now, I think I've professed my just overall adoration for Sigourney Weaver in general in previous videos, but oh, she's so good. She hasn't done as many comedies as she easily could have, because she's really good at it. So her role on the show was basically all she did was stand there, display cleavage, and repeat whatever the computer said. And her owning of that, not just as an actress in the movie, but as the character of the actress she's playing, owning that part, where she actually turns to Tim Allen and goes, "Look, I have one stupid job on this ship, and I'm gonna do it." She's so good. And the moments where she gets exasperated, she does that incredibly well. There's a part later on where they're sort of moving through the ship, and there's the ridiculous inner workings of the ship, because again, it was based off the TV show that these aliens saw. And at one point, she's just going, "Why is this here?" And she does the exasperation wonderfully. And of course, the late great Alan Rickman has basically the Spock analog, the classically trained actor who wants to do theater, who wants to do serious dramatics, but is always remembered for this stupid part on this stupid TV show, and he hates it. And nobody does just that sense of lifelong bitterness like Alan Rickman. God, his voice and without ever raising his voice, but just the venom that drips from his mouth when he has to repeat some of these lines that he hates so much. And then we've got actually who I like, who was my favorite character in my first viewing. We have Tony Shalhoub playing, he's kind of oh boy, how do I explain it? We don't really know what's wrong with him. Something is very clearly wrong with this guy because he is not processing any of this information the way that any of his co-stars are processing this information. So, this isn't really a spoiler because it's very much at the beginning. So at the beginning, when the way they get transported onto this ship is it's not like getting beamed up or down like on Star Trek. They get encapsulated in this sort of gel pod that then shoots them through space until they land on the ship. And all of his co-stars, they land there kind of, and he just lands and he's like, that was a hell of a thing. And it's wonderful. It's brilliant. Like I said, we never really know what's wrong with him. We don't know if he's stoned, if he was kind of always like this, if he just used to do drugs and had one LSD trip too many and now this is a permanent state for him. We have no idea what his deal is, which I kind of love. I kind of love that they don't specifically lay out what is off about this guy, but you just get to enjoy his being off. And I think it actually helps avoid it becoming problematic, because if they had said specifically, oh, he's autistic, he smokes weed, whatever they could have done to explain why he is this way could have made the work problematic, because it, especially if it's not drugs and they link it to a specific condition and you're like, oh boy, is that accurate? Is that, is that decent? Is that poor representation? Is that, whatever? But by not specifying what it is, we just get a guy who's off. And you get to just enjoy that. Even now, you get to just enjoy that. And the rest of the cast is great, too. You have Rainn Wilson as one of the aliens, who's terrific. There is... oh, boy. What's his name? Holy shit. Sam Rockwell, who I've mentioned in the past, I don't like. Not for any particular reason, I just don't like him. This is one of the few parts I'm actually okay with him in, because I'm not expected to take him seriously or even like him all that much. So he works for me, and he's not doing what I feel has kind of become his stock character. He's a bit more animated. He's a bit more over the top, which I enjoy seeing. So his part... He was an extra on the TV show once, basically one of the red shirts, guy who went down with the away team and died. And he accidentally gets caught up in all this, which means he is panicking right from the beginning, going, I'm gonna die! I played the guy who died, I'm gonna die! And it's a fun meta commentary. And here's the thing about this. This manages to pull off what I think a lot of lesser films that have tried to do a similar vibe and humor, it manages to pull it off, because a lot of things like this, when they effectively make fun of a beloved property, and more specifically make fun of the fandom. Because they do. We see the fandom depicted, at the conventions. We get it kind of encapsulated by a character who Justin Long plays. And obviously the aliens take this literally. So they are the very embodiment of the fans who take stuff too seriously. And when something tries to do that, very often it comes off as dismissive, as insulting. But it doesn't here, because ultimately where the film goes and how it wraps up, it acknowledges that, yes, This was a made up, this is all fake. This is all ridiculous. But there's still value in it. There's value in the lessons that these people have taken from this show. They are lessons worth carrying in your life. They give these people a community. They give them something to bond around. It recognizes the positive elements of fandom, while at the same time not ignoring the sometimes sad elements of fandom. So I think it strikes that balance really well. I think that's a big part of why Star Trek fans tend to like this a lot. And you wouldn't necessarily expect that because, fans don't like to be made fun of. But this doesn't feel like making fun. It feels, this is the kind of humor that feels like it's made by people who also love this. So it feels like I don't know a ton about the writers or the director if they are Trek fans, but at the very least they understood how to approach that and portray that, because it feels like the kind of send-up that is done by somebody who genuinely understands the material and understands why people like it and why it's important to them. So that goes a long way towards avoiding what could have been some real cringy stuff. And, when it makes fun of Star Trek and shows like it, it does so with legitimate points and also just gently, just ribbingly, like pointing out that the captain always ends up without a shirt whenever he's fighting something, and all these sorts of things. And the other thing that helps is that it's not uncommon for these sorts of satires to basically get underfunded and they look cheap. So you get a lot of stuff that's basically just ends up being elevated fan films. Stuff like this rarely gets a decent budget, but this does have a decent budget, which means the effects at the time it came out were on par with a legitimate sci-fi film. But it's a comedy. It's a parody. And the best kind of parodies are always the ones that at least visually match the thing they're parodying. The more you can look like the real thing, the better the comedy lands. And this is able to do that in a way that I would be surprised if it ever happens again, because trying to look like a legitimate Star Wars or Marvel or DC or whatever film is extremely expensive. So the very idea of launching an original comedy with the budget of a sci-fi film, of a sci-fi action film, that's insane. But they did it here. I'm really glad for it. This is a movie that I laugh every time, and I often laugh at different things every time. And they cover the gamut with the stuff that they pick on, right down to the kid who piloted the ship, who has a little jab at sort of the Wesley type characters. But again, at the same time, not hateful jabbing, a loving jab, because this isn't a takedown of Star Trek and Star Trek fans. It's a roast. And it's the kind of roast, forget Friars Club and, the Comedy Central roast, crap like that. They're just trying to be as cruel as possible. But it's the kind of roast that happens between friends, between people who know each other, love each other, love the same things, but aren't above just laughing about it, because it's important to be able to do that. And if you've never seen Galaxy Quest before, do, right away. I really strongly recommend this film. It's even separate from its references. The humor works much in the same way something like Airplane or Blazing Saddles did. Even if you don't know the tropes that they're picking apart, the jokes are funny in and of themselves. And if you know the tropes, it's all the funnier. So if you've never seen it, give it a watch. If you have seen it, when was the last time you rewatched it? Seriously, I hadn't seen it in a few years, so it was nice to have it be brought up for this. So those are my thoughts on Galaxy Quest. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's a ton of buttons down there too, plus also links for stuff such as my Patreon. And check it out if you feel like it. But remember, folks, you are the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, This council is adjourned.